4, 3, 2.
Hi, everybody. I hope that you are getting a lot of really good information from the session today. I'm very excited to talk with Anson Green today. He's going to give us some advice about leadership with your state associations and leadership in general, really. So it's my pleasure to introduce Anson Green.
Hi, I want to thank everybody for attending today, and really happy to focus on this topic for COABE and for the folks attending the session. I think state associations are absolutely vital for the health of a real robust and kind of invigorated adult education system in any state. I come from Texas. I was the state director for adult education for 7 years, and I've been in adult education since 1996. And oddly enough, the first real dose of adult education I ever got was at a state association conference. I had been hired to be a part-time GED teacher in San Antonio, Texas. And my boss said, you don't know much about adult education, go to this event. And she sent me to our state association event in Texas, the TALE Conference, Texas Association for Literacy and Adult Education. And right then I knew I had found a career for myself. And I always think back to that, even when I drive by the hotel, I think back to that being such a critical moment for me. And the reason is I really found that I got such great leadership and guidance from our association, starting at that event, but really through the years. And so I want to kind of focus on that aspect of things. I left the job as state director. Now I'm at Tyson Foods, working on adult education for Upward Academy and Upward Pathways, and working with many different states now in their associations as we deploy a workplace-focused adult education program.
Great, thanks so much, Anson. So I'm just going to, shoot off a few questions to you, give you some time to answer. So again, knowing the audience are it's state association board members, some that are maybe veteran and more mature in their role, and some new. Why do you think state association leaders are really important to the field?
I think state association leaders really form a strong component of a partnership at the state level for the adult education system. Having been a state director, I can tell you one of the biggest fears I always had was not being relevant to what was happening at the front line. And the only way to be relevant is to have good feedback and guidance through different mechanisms. I had a small staff, so that was one mechanism, but really the state association and those leaders on the board and other members that were part of the association were really vital in telling me what was needed at the front line for teachers. Our field is so heavy with frontline workers that are part-time, that are coming in. There's a turnover in our field. And so staying relevant to the vibe of what's happening in the state is critical. And you need really folks on the boards and at the associations that can provide you candid, good feedback at the state level for what's needed when it comes to professional development or policy guidance. And I found that always to be kind of a comforting place for me to go in a state like Texas. Trying to get everybody's opinion is really difficult, and trying to figure out what you need to do as a leader at the state level is critical. So I really did lean on our state association greatly. I had them on an advisory board that I frequented and used for feedback, and really found that it was the role of the association to give a good feedback back to me, but then also on the flip side, for them to deliver information out to the field. We had 6,000 teachers in Texas. I couldn't hope to reach those teachers through webinars and policy letters and events that I would attend. I needed many, many different ways to get the word out. And the association was one mechanism. Much like COABE does at the national level, the association really serves as a role of communication both ways. But I always felt like if I was to give information to our state organization, I knew it was going to get out there and reach a good part of those 6,000 individuals.
Great, thanks, Anson. So I'm going to skip to the next question, really, because you brought it up, your relationship as a state director to
Yeah.
the state association. So how can state associations build that kind of relationship with their state director? And do you have any examples of joint work that you did as a director with the state association?
Yeah, I think, I want to reflect on a couple of things. One is that when we think of the state associations, what we did in Texas and other states do this too is really encouraged a system of collaboration, not only with the state office, but with other associations. And so in Texas, we have kind of the Adult Education Association. We have a association for nonprofit volunteer programs, and then we had associations for community colleges and workforce boards. And one of the things I always encouraged the associations to do is to collaborate with each other also, because our students often are bouncing through these different systems. And it's really nice to have communication across our colleges, our workforce systems, adult education. So one of the things, of the many things we really did together was really work together to deploy a single message out on various topics. And so, for example, so much focus has been put on the transition of adult education students into community colleges. And so what I did was work with our state association, but also our community college association to make sure that our messaging was consistent about what kind of services were available to lower skilled individuals through our colleges and through our adult education systems. The same was true in our workforce development system. We would use our association as kind of a mechanism to deploy change events. So when we started to really migrate through WIOA, I knew I was going to need every mechanism I could to leverage. And so the association helped me deploy and travel the state and hold events across the state to get out and talk about WIOA changes. But we did that in lockstep with our workforce system. And so no matter what side of the table folks were sitting on, whether it was workforce, college, or adult education or volunteer programs, we knew the message was going to be consistent and that there was a continuity of services that we were talking about, not a siloed kind of model. So I think it was those kind of things that really stood out to me that were very successful, and it made everybody feel good because no one really does want to operate in a silo. They want to work as a system, but it takes organizational leaders that see themselves not as the leader, but as part of one among equals when it comes to their other associations and organizations in the state.
It's great advice, Anson. So just want to kind of wrap up with any kind of closing thoughts, anything else you think state association leaders really should kind of hear about leadership as a board?
Sure. I think some things are really important when it comes to the board and the leadership of any state association. One is make sure that on the board and even as yourself, that you really know the business that you're in. I think the more credibility you have and knowledge you have about what adult education is, how it operates, how the funding works, how performance works, is absolutely vital. Occasionally, I run across folks that are in leadership positions, but they really don't know as much about the system as they need to, particularly about things like funding and performance, which are really what the frontline workforce and your local providers care about the most. How am I going to get funded and how am I going to perform? And so, association leaders that really spend the time to do their homework in that area, and that could mean working with the state office of adult education to find out what's coming up in those areas of funding and performance. I think it's really, really critical. I've also found that in some of the states where they're smaller states, maybe they just don't have as much talent in the state, bringing in talent to the state is very critical. I myself have gone to other states, been a guest speaker, come in, and I really looked up to those state associations, sometimes very small, that knew they really wanted to stay on the cutting edge of things, and some of the bigger states might have had more capacity in those areas or expertise. And so I think again, knowing your business and knowing what you do might also mean knowing who to bring in to share and kind of lift the education level of those teachers and frontline practitioners when it comes to professional development is really, really critical. So that relevancy, if you're not relevant, folks won't pay the dues for your association. They won't go to the events. And so that relevancy really has to do with you being knowledgeable and knowing what is needed in the state and then who to deliver that message.
Well, I want to just thank you so much, Anson, for sharing your perspective today. I know that it's going to be really helpful to the participants of this session. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
So Anson, just wondering if you have any advice for state associations about, especially when it comes to the relationship with the state director. Are there any things that you would say to do or not do?
Yeah, I think to do is definitely find ways, no matter what, to really work as a system with the state office. I hear instances where there's competition, things get competitive, sometimes even conflicting between the state associations and the state office. And I really would advise that those are situations that the state association should really continually think about how can they find a way to come together with what the state office is doing or needing during WIOA transition, which was very stressful for many states and for teachers and programs. It was such a big change. There were these moments where there were associations that really wanted to look back into how things were done in the past and hang to that. And that's what the teachers were saying they wanted. They didn't like WIOA. But at the end of the day, that was the law. And rather than coming into competition with the state office and maybe advocating for things the state office couldn't support, I think those situations are only remedied by really having the both parties, but the state association for sure, being able to find a way to find something in the middle that they can work on together. It comes up in legislative sessions also where policy is pushed that maybe the association agrees with or doesn't agree with, and maybe it's in conflict with the state office. And I always advise leaders in the associations, you're most likely better able to lobby and advocate for things than the state office can. And so finding a way to sing on the same page when it comes to those issues rather than come into conflict is absolutely vital, because at the end of the day, everybody represents the teachers in the frontline programs. And if you're busy arguing with each other about something, you're really not doing that main mission of serving that frontline worker, that teaching workforce that really needs to hear a clear, straight voice. They're part-time, they're busy, and they really need to be able to see that the state office and the state association are working together and that they're building a stronger system for everybody.
Thanks, Anson. That's really great advice.